Hello everyone, tonight we take you to a place no one wants to go, inside the final hours of William Wallace, the man England labeled a traitor and Scotland called a patriot. You're not in the past. You're in the cold stone present of the Tower of London, and the hour is late. You sit on damp straw in a cell barely wide enough to stretch your legs. Iron shackles rub your wrists raw. The wall behind you is slick with moisture, the kind that seeps in from centuries of secrets whispered into stone. A single torch flickers just outside the iron-barred door, casting dancing shadows like ghosts come to taunt you. You shift slightly, and the chains clink a sound that no longer startles you. It's become part of your breath. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've stopped keeping track of hours. The tower doesn't offer you the sun. Time here is marked by the scrape of boots, the metallic slam of doors, and the irregular visits of the guards, some curious, some indifferent, and one who always smells like onions and shame. It's quiet now. The night has a thickness to it, the kind that settles into the corners of your thoughts. You breathe slow because there's no use breathing fast. That just gives the fear more room to stretch its legs. You remember the last time you slept? It wasn't last night. It wasn't even 2 nights ago. You slept on a moving cart, wrists bound, head hanging low, lulled to sleep by the rhythm of the wheels and the weight of your defeat. That was days ago, or weeks. Time here is curled into itself. A rat skitters across the floor, bold enough to show itself in front of you. It pauses, lifts its nose, then disappears. You're not even worth bothering tonight. There's something oddly luxurious about still being alive. You're not supposed to be. They dragged you here to make you an example, hung, drawn, quartered. That trifecta of theatrical endings. But for now, you're just a man in a cell, and nobody's screaming yet. It smells like mildew. There's a faint sweetness too, decay maybe. Something organic is rotting in a corner, but it's been there long enough that your nose barely flinches. The scent is a companion now. You stretch your fingers slowly. It hurts. The iron manacles bite into flesh. Your right thumb has been numb for days, cut circulation maybe. Not worth worrying about. Nothing is, except not breaking. You've decided something. You won't give them what they want. They want a display. They want begging, sobbing regret. Maybe even a scream if they're lucky. Something to tell their friends about at the tavern later. He screamed like a pig at the end. But you won't. You adjust your weight again, leaning into the stone wall behind you. It's oddly warm. Not comfortable, but warmer than your own skin. Your tunic is stiff with old blood and sweat. You haven't been allowed to wash. There's dignity in filth too, if you frame it right. You think of home, though home is a loose word. You never really had one place. The glen you hid in during that first winter. The cave you shared with Robert and 2 other men when food was scarce. The abandoned abbey where you pretended to pray, but mostly just listened to the rain. Each one a whisper of shelter. You exhale. The torch outside your door sputters, and for a moment the shadows flee. You hear a cough from somewhere down the corridor. A prisoner or a guard or a ghost. It doesn't matter. You're not alone, but you may as well be. You try to crack your neck, and the vertebrae resist before giving in with a click. You used to be stronger. You remember lifting broadswords with ease. Now lifting your own legs feels like a betrayal of energy. You listen to the night. No birds, no trees rustling. Just the occasional shuffle-drip groan of ancient wood, adjusting to the humidity of human misery. Historians still argue whether Wallace spent his last night in solitude, or was given the company of a priest or a guard to watch him sleep. You'd almost prefer the silence. There's no one to lie to, no one to perform for. You hum under your breath, an old tune barely remembered. You don't know why. Maybe to test if your voice still works. It does. Barely. There's a flicker of something. Hope. No, not hope. Just awareness. You're not gone yet. And if you're not gone yet, you're still in control. A little. Your back shifts against the wall again, and your bones feel like they're trying to whisper secrets through your spine. You consider screaming now just for the echo. But no. That would be a waste. A scream once released is gone. Silence, on the other hand, stays. It echoes inward. And in the dark, it's the only voice that answers back. You didn't expect it to be a Scot who brought you down. The night is still thick, but now your thoughts take a sharper turn away from the slow ache of stone and bone towards something deeper: betrayal. A particular kind. The kind that wears your accent and knows your hiding places. The kind that shares your bread, then sells your head. You see his face again, Sir John de Menteith. You see the casual way he gave you up, as if he were returning a borrowed cloak. And maybe that's all you ever were to him, something borrowed, something useful, something disposable. It happened near Glasgow, in the shadows of Rob Royston. The hut was quiet. You remember the smell of pine needles and sweat. You were tired, God, always tired. And for once you'd allowed yourself rest. A mistake. You'll make very few more. They took you without much of a struggle. You'd lost the will, or maybe you'd just known the game was over. There were too many of them, and you were one man with a fading name, and a bounty that made men forget honor. Historians still argue whether de Menteith betrayed you out of fear ambition or royal persuasion. Some even claim he thought it was a mercy that your death would unify the cause. That's the most insulting lie of all. No one betrays for unity. They betray for coin, or for comfort, or because looking away is just too damn hard. You shift on the cold floor, adjusting your leg that has long since fallen asleep. Your left ankle was twisted slightly when they yanked you from the horse cart. It never really recovered. A useless thing now, but that's what you've become to most people, a symbol stripped of its usefulness. A warning more than a man. You breathe in, and you remember the look on de Menteith's face. He didn't smile, he didn't sneer. He just avoided your eyes. That's worse. Because men who won't meet your gaze know exactly what they've done. The torch outside your cell crackles, and then briefly flares. You wonder if he sleeps well, that man. Or if somewhere in his dreams, your silence returns louder than any words you could have spoken. You think of all the men who died beside you, and those who died because they stood beside you. Some were farmers, some were thieves. One was a poet who tried to write a verse before his final breath. You never heard the end of it. Betrayal, you've learned, doesn't need to be loud. It can come softly like a hand on your shoulder, a nod, a smile over ale. And then a door opens, and you never see the sky again. Your wrists itch. Not from the iron, from memory. That kind of itch can't be scratched. It's the kind that creeps under your skin and settles there. It speaks and questions. Could you have avoided it, trusted less, moved faster? But none of that matters. The past is a path with no turns. You remember the way they looked at you when they dragged you into London? Not like a man, like a monster in a cage. There were children in the crowd, held up on shoulders pointing. One boy threw a crust of bread and missed by several feet. You remember the arc it made as it sailed over your head. Absurd what the brain remembers when it should be falling apart. You've lost battles, lost allies, lost hope more than once. But betrayal, it hits different. Not like a blade, like a withdrawal, like warmth vanishing from a room. The English wanted you caught, yeah. But it was a Scot who showed them the way. The irony, you once fought beside Menteith, or near him at least. Same battlefields, same cause, if only briefly. You both believed in something then. Maybe. Or maybe you just needed enemies, and he needed a ladder. Funny how rebellion attracts climbers. You try to spit, but your mouth is too dry. The gesture is there, though. Imaginary defiance. It counts. There's a rat again. The same one, hard to say. This one has a scar along its side. You watch it disappear into the cracks between the stones. Even it knows where to hide. Your mind wanders again to the moment the English soldiers clapped you in irons. The first time. Your hands still bore calluses from your sword. They had to pry your fingers apart. One guard looked nervous. Maybe he'd heard stories about you biting off ears or throwing off 5 men alone. None of those stories were true. Or maybe one was. You don't even remember now. Myths move faster than facts. And your legend? Well, that's no longer yours to steer. You close your eyes and whisper his name once. Just once. Not as a curse. Not even as a prayer. Just an acknowledgement. Menteith. May the name curdle in his descendants' mouths. Or may they forget it entirely. That might be worse. You know where your mind goes when you stop fighting it. It drifts to Stirling. Not the city. The bridge. You can almost hear it now, the clash of metal on metal. The panicked cries of English soldiers. The sharp neigh of terrified horses backing into the river. The rush of water and men tangled together, swept away like a discarded army of dolls. You sit motionless in your cell, but your memories move. They pull you back to that one day where everything worked. Where rebellion didn't feel like desperation, it felt like possibility. It was 1297. You remember the smell of wet earth and tension. You had fewer men, fewer arms, but better ground. Better heart, and no one expected you to win. That helped. You watch it again now, this memory of yours. You see your own men ill-fed but determined hiding in the tree line. You see the English crossing the bridge in tight ranks, arrogant in their numbers, unaware they were about to be swallowed by strategy and mud. Historians still argue whether the victory at Stirling was due to your planning or English stupidity. So, you'll never tell. Let them debate. That's what historians are for making guesses while you rot in the dark. But it was beautiful, wasn't it? You gave the order when only half the English had crossed. A perfect bottleneck. And then chaos. Swords flashing like lightning. Screams, metal splinters. The bridge itself groaning under the weight of armored failure. You gripped your sword like it was part of your arm. You remember the feel of it, the leather-wrapped hilt damp with morning dew and sweat. You remember how your heart thudded not in fear, but in rhythm. A rhythm that said, "This is how freedom sounds." A joke flickers in your mind, uninvited. You peeked early Wallace? You almost smile. You shift again, muscles groaning. Every joint protests. Your body is a map of decisions, mistakes, and victories turned into scars. But Stirling. That one's a tattoo on your soul. It's not just the battle you remember. It's the aftermath. Your men cheering covered in grime and glory. The river thick with bodies and blood, yes, but also with proof. That you could win. That Scotland wasn't just hills and sheep and sorrow, it was resistance. They called you Guardian of the Realm after that. A ridiculous title like placing a crown on a storm. You wore it anyway. Not because it fit, but because someone had to. You rub your wrist, feeling the rough edge of the iron manacle. The scar under it came later, another battle, another betrayal. But in some strange way, it traces back to that day at the bridge. Victory makes you visible, and visibility is dangerous. There's a sound now distant and rhythmic. Footsteps, drums, or just your own pulse echoing in your ears. You lean your head back against the wall. Cold stone, always cold. You think of the men who didn't live long enough to see Sterling. Jack Short, Malcolm, the boy whose name you never learned, but who always whistled off-key while sharpening blades. Gone before the bridge. Gone before it all started to matter. You hope someone told their stories. You didn't win Scotland that day, but you made them feel like it was possible. And sometimes that's all people need. Not a crown, not land. Just the hope that tomorrow might not belong to someone else. You close your eyes just for a second. But your mind keeps going. You remember how the English commander scrambled Cressingham in particular. Oh, that pompous man. They say after his death his body was flayed and parts of it turned into a belt. Fringe historians still debate whether that belt ever existed. You don't care. The idea of it is what matters. Symbolism is stronger than facts when the facts are grim. You're aware painfully that Sterling wasn't the end. You didn't ride off into the sunset. There were more battles, more politics, and eventually more losses. But in this cell with this damp air and these rusted chains, you let yourself revisit just one moment of clarity. The way the sun hit the river, the sound of the English commanders shouting, then gasping. The way your men looked at you, not as a myth, but as a man they'd follow. Even now, as your strength wanes and your time thins, that one day keeps you upright. Not physically, your spine's had enough, but mentally. Spiritually, if that word still holds any water. You'd trade nothing for that bridge, except maybe a blanket. There was a letter, maybe, maybe not. But the rumor never dies. You sit in the half-dark and let your mind drift to her. Isabella, Queen of England, barely more than a girl. When the rumors started swirling, some called her your admirer. Others your ally, still others your imaginary savior. None of them were in the room, of course. That's how rumors work. They slip through cracks in facts and take root where doubt lives. Historians still argue whether Isabella of France ever met you, let alone conspired to help you escape. Some romanticize it. A beautiful queen moved by tales of your heroism, slipping notes through palace corridors to save a barbarian legend. Others are more cynical, saying the story was fabricated to insult Edward to paint him as the cuckolded king, while his young wife admired the enemy. You have no way to confirm any of it. All you know is that one night in your cell months ago, or was it weeks, a guard slipped you something. Not food, not a weapon. Just a folded scrap of parchment, damp at the corners, the writing smudged. You read it in the dark. There are those who do not wish to see you end this way. Keep breathing. No signature, no seal, no follow-up. It could have been a joke. Could have been meant for someone else. Could have been some bored scribe's idea of sport. But it was a strange comfort, those words. You kept it in your boot until the day they stripped you for parade. Then it was gone. Probably burned, or read aloud in some private chamber, laughed over between sips of wine. Still you wonder. She was married to Longshanks's son, the limp-willed Edward. You imagine palace life must have been a slow suffocation. Maybe stories of defiant men appealed to her. Maybe they didn't. Maybe she never knew your name until it was carved on the scaffold board. But in this quiet space, you let the idea live. a queen's secret sympathy, a moment where your name stirred in the mouth of royalty as something other than traitor, a note smuggled through velvet corridors and candlelit fear. It's a pretty fiction, and right now, pretty fictions are currency. Your cell stinks. The torch is sputtering again. The guard who brought your gruel earlier had a limp and didn't meet your eyes. That's happening more and more. Even the cruel ones are falling quiet. They can smell the end coming. Everyone does. You shift again, bones grinding against the stone floor. You wonder what she's doing right now. If Isabella thinks of you at all. Probably not. Or maybe just once when she walks past some tapestry depicting the Scottish barbarian, she'll pause a second longer than usual. Would that matter, you told yourself once, that legacy was nonsense? That what mattered was action, not memory. But here, on the last night of your breath, you start to revise that opinion. If all you leave behind is silence, then silence becomes your legacy. A woman's letter, real or not, says something else. It says your silence has an echo. You remember how the rumor took hold. Even your jailers spoke of it. The young queen, the rebel knight, a forbidden alliance. You could see the hope in their eyes when they repeated it as if they wanted it to be true because it gave them a better story to hold on to. And people always crave better stories. You smirk. Just a little. Your lips crack at the corners and it hurts. That's fine. You've endured worse than a broken smile. The letter was gone before the torture began. You never asked about it. Never mentioned it aloud. That's how fragile it felt. As if saying it would burn it from the world. You look down at your hands. Still calloused, still stained. Not gentle hands, not royal hands. But they once held a sword, and for a moment maybe a queen's pity. You never needed her rescue, but you wanted her witness. There's dignity in being seen. You inhale. The scent of wet ash and old straw fills your nose. You close your eyes and allow yourself one impossible image, Isabella riding through the gates of the tower cloak, billowing, demanding your release with fire in her eyes and French curses on her tongue. Ridiculous, delightful, and entirely false. But isn't that the point? You hold on to that fiction, not because you believe it, but because it makes this stone cell feel slightly less heavy, slightly less final. And maybe, just maybe somewhere in a palace she reads by candlelight and thinks of the man who didn't scream. You always knew you wouldn't wear a crown. Even when they called you Guardian of Scotland, even when your name echoed through camps and castles, you never mistook yourself for a king. You weren't bred for silk or ceremony. You were bred for mud and movement, for cold steel and colder nights. Still, Robert the Bruce's silence stings more than the chains. You shift, wincing at the familiar pinch of metal biting into your wrists. The light's thinner now. Or maybe you're just seeing less. Either way, your thoughts grow louder, and they keep circling back to him, the man who might have changed everything. You once called him ally, fought beside him when the cause was fresh and the wine still flowed after skirmishes. He was clever, charming in that arrogant, noble way. You never trusted him completely, but there were nights you almost did. That's saying something. And then he vanished. No messages, no messengers. Just distance. A long, uncomfortable quiet that stretched across battlefields and years. Historians still argue whether Robert betrayed you, abandoned you, or simply waited. Some say he played the long game. Others say he just got lucky. Either way, it's hard not to taste bitterness when you think of his name now. You remember the last time you saw him. Brief, tense, words unsaid crowding the air between you. You warned him, don't wait too long. He nodded, or maybe blinked. You can't recall. But he did wait. Waited until after you were captured. After you were dragged through the streets in mockery. After your title, your name, your dignity were paraded like cheap trophies. Then he made his move. The man who couldn't stand with you became the man everyone remembered. You tilt your head back against the wall, let your skull thud gently against stone. Once. Twice. Not hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to feel. There's a strange kind of loneliness in being first. You blazed, and they watched. You fought, and they calculated. And when you fell, they adjusted their banners. You weren't the only rebel, just the loudest, the most inconvenient. And maybe that's the real reason he stayed quiet. He wasn't stupid. He saw what happened to the outspoken, to the unrelenting, to the men who didn't play the game. And he wasn't about to share your cell, your sentence, or your silence. He was going to wait, smile, shake hands, and strike when it mattered. Smart. You hate how smart it was. You hear something, a voice outside. Low, muffled. Not for you. Nothing is anymore. You let it pass like wind under a door. You're not jealous. Not really. He fought for Scotland too. And eventually, he won. Bannockburn, they say, will echo longer than Stirling. Longer than anything you did. But echoes are strange things. They stretch, they shift, and sometimes they come from unexpected mouths. You know they won't carve your face into coins, but they might whisper your name into fires. That's something. You picture Bruce, now older, steadier, cloaked in royal colors. You wonder if he remembers you, or if he's conveniently rewritten your part in his head. People do that. History isn't a scroll, it's a quilt. Stitched by those who survived it, shaped by those who benefited most. Maybe he lights a candle for you once a year. Maybe he raises a cup. Maybe he forgets. You clench your fists, feel the cold bite of the manacles. You didn't need a crown. You needed comrades. You got admirers. That's the cruel thing about martyrdom. You never get to see who shows up at your statue. You stare at the opposite wall. Nothing to see, just worn stone and the weight of someone else's rise. You inhale slowly the way you used to before a charge. You don't need to forgive him, but you won't curse him either. Not here. Not now. Let history sort out who was brave, who was cautious, and who just happened to survive. You don't need a crown. But it would have been nice if he'd said goodbye. The light creeps in pale and watery, as if even the sun hesitates to witness what's coming. You watch it climb the walls, slow, indifferent, not caring that this is your last sunrise. It doesn't care about kings or rebels. It touches the stone just the same. No ceremony, no trumpet, just the quiet unfurling of day, like a shrug from the sky. You blink against it. Not because it's bright, it's not, but because it's real. It's morning. Again. It's remarkable, really, that the world still bothers to rotate. That clouds still drift. That birds still make their annoying little songs just outside a man's final breath. You shift against the floor, and the chain tugs at your ankle. A small protest. A daily ritual now. There's something to be said for routine. You feel tired, but not the kind of tired that invites sleep. This is the kind of tired that settles in your bones, like debt. And there's no repayment plan when the ledger is your body. But still, you watch the light. You think about how many mornings you've seen. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Some through misty glens, others from the saddle riding into some fogged-up corner of England with rain in your boots and vengeance in your chest. This one is quieter. The sun here doesn't rise with drama. It sort of unfolds. A soggy blanket of daylight thrown carelessly across the tower. It filters through the narrow window slit above, catching dust that dances lazily in the beam. You stare at the particles. They move like thoughts, chaotic, directionless, hard to hold. And still, beautiful. Historians still argue whether Wallace was allowed to see the sunrise on his final day, or if he was kept in darkness until the last moment. You'd like to think this version is true, because even rebels deserve one last glimpse of a sky they fought under. You shift your weight, ignoring the complaints from your knees. They've given up making threats. Now they just whisper pain like background music. A breeze drifts through the slit above. Barely there, but enough. It carries the scent of soot horses and bread baking somewhere far off. It's insulting, really, how normal the city remains. Just another Tuesday in London. A man's death. A loaf rising. A chimney smoking. Everything in its place. You hear movement now, metal on stone. Distant voices. The day has begun for the rest of them. You wonder if someone is preparing your route? If a man with thick hands and a grim mouth is making sure the cart is clean, if ropes are being tested, if the executioner is oiling his blade or just finishing breakfast. You're part of someone's checklist today. You used to be the one making lists. Rations, horses, routes, scouts. Now you're an item at the bottom of the page display prisoner at Smithfield. You don't flinch at the thought. You're past flinching. Flinching is for people who think they still have options. You try to stretch. Fail. Try again. Settle for adjusting your shoulders. The torch outside your cell has gone out. No need for it now. The sun does the job reluctantly. You take another breath. It hurts. But in a way that feels important. You picture the city outside, vendors setting up guards, yawning people already gathering for the spectacle. Maybe some children being hoisted onto shoulders. A man selling sweetmeats. Someone laughing too loudly. You wonder what they expect to see. A monster, a madman, a broken hero. You decide you won't give them any of that. You'll give them nothing. Let silence be your final rebellion. You stare at the beam of light now crawling across the floor. It's moved a few inches, touching the wall beside you. It's warm. You shift just enough so that your fingers find it. Warmth. Actual warmth. It startles you. For a moment, you close your eyes and pretend you're not here. That the warmth is from a fire. That the stone beneath you is a hearth, not a prison. That someone will call your name soon, but it will be for supper, not sentence. It lasts maybe 10 seconds. Then the voice comes. A guard. Clipped. English. Trying not to sound nervous. He says your name badly. Then the clink of keys. You open your eyes. The warmth is still there, just barely brushing your fingers. You smile at it. Not for hope, not for courage, just because it's something. A final sunrise. Uneventful. Unapologetic. Perfect. They send a priest. You hear the shuffle of his sandals before you see his face. He walks like he doesn't want to be here, but also like he's done this before. A man used to last rites, used to final confessions, used to stepping into rooms filled with fear and stink and stubbornness. He pauses at the threshold of your cell. Doesn't enter immediately. Smart man. You glance up. He's older. Robes too clean for this place. His hands are folded neatly, but his eyes dart left, right, anywhere but your face. Then they settle. There's a small moment of recognition. Not admiration, not disgust, just recognition. He knows who you are. He steps in, carefully, like you might explode. He offers a greeting, soft, Latin, the sort of words meant to comfort. You don't answer. He waits. Then, as they always do, he tries the usual script. He offers you a chance to confess, to make peace, to clear your soul before the pain comes. You've heard this before. So many men found God at the last minute, or at least claimed to. Maybe it helped. Maybe they needed to believe someone was listening even as the ropes tightened. You've never been one for theatrics. You shift slightly the chains, rattling just enough to make the priest flinch. No confession, you say, voice low. He swallows, nods, doesn't push. He sits beside you, not close, not far. The space between you is filled with possibilities neither of you will act on. I could read a passage he offers. You shrug. Not yes, not no. He opens a small book. Psalms. Of course it's Psalms. Comfort food for the dying. He reads. You stop listening after the second verse. Not out of disrespect, just you've heard enough verses for a lifetime. Instead you remember. Not battles, not speeches. Something quieter. A moment on a hilltop, years ago. Mist curling around your boots. You stood beside a boy whose name you've long forgotten. He asked you if you believed in heaven. You told him the truth, I don't know. But I believe in consequences. He laughed. Then he died in the next battle. You wonder if the priest ever met someone like that boy. Someone too young to question, too old to be spared. You glance at the man now, his voice still calm, steady. A trained voice, meant to ease. Historians still argue whether Wallace refused last rites out of pride belief or bitterness. Some accounts say he spat. Others say he prayed in Gaelic, quietly, defiantly. You're not here to clarify. All you know is that silence feels better. You've made your peace in other ways. You've told your truth to trees and firelight and storm clouds. You've screamed it into the dirt after battle. You've whispered it over the graves of comrades who had no names and no priest to comfort them. This man, he means well. But you've nothing left to confess. The priest finishes his reading, closes the book gently. The sound it makes is final, like the click of a door. He looks at you again, like he's not sure what to say next. You speak first. Do you think God prefers honesty or repentance? He blinks. Surprised, like, I suppose, both, he says. You nod slowly. I've never been good at the second. He manages a tight smile. Not forced, just uncertain. He leaves a small wooden cross beside you, doesn't press it into your hand, just places it on the ground like a peace offering or a boundary line. Then he leaves. No final blessing, no absolution, just footsteps fading. You stare at the cross. You don't pick it up, not because you hate it, just because it's not yours. You lean back against the wall again. The sunbeam from earlier has shifted. It's gone now. Or maybe it just moved beyond your reach. You sigh, not out of despair, just breath leaving. You're not angry. You're not saved. You're awake. And that's enough. You hear his voice in your head before you ever saw his face. Longshanks. Edward there's King of England, Hammer of the Scots. Though, honestly, you've always thought bludgeon was a better word. He wasn't precise. He was brutal. A man who never walked around a problem if he could gallop through it wearing plate armor and a sneer. And yet, he never faced you. Not really. You picture him now sitting in some richly upholstered chair, legs crossed awkwardly because his gout always flared up when the air was damp. Surrounded by sycophants, all pretending they didn't notice the king grunting every time he shifted. One eye on his enemies, the other on his own legacy, and maybe just a flicker of fear that you, some backwater knight with a borrowed broadsword, might undo centuries of English pride. You were the itch he couldn't scratch. He tried, of course, sent armies, built castles, bought allies. He outlawed your name in markets and taverns, declared your death a matter of royal hygiene. But he never came in person. Historians still argue whether Edward I actively demanded your execution to be as brutal as possible, or whether it was merely standard procedure. The kind of cruelty that's been sanded smooth by bureaucracy. A signature on a parchment, a line in a ledger. Item 1, Scotsman rebel to be publicly dismantled. You don't imagine he lost much sleep over it. Still, he knew you were dangerous. More dangerous than armies. You were an idea. A voice that wouldn't hush. A thorn in the English boot that refused to be plucked. Even now, you wonder if he wakes in the night sometimes and hears your name echo off stone walls. Probably not. Men like him sleep deeply. History is their blanket. But you like to think there was one moment, just one, where he stared out over the walls of Westminster, stared north, and wondered if he'd made a mistake. If he gave you too much power by trying so hard to crush you. You exhale through your nose, almost a laugh. He made you famous. You were just another angry man with a sword and some half-decent speeches until he decided you were a threat worth naming. Worth hunting, worth humiliating. And here you are, not broken, not begging, just breathing. You remember hearing whispers from your guards that Edward is old now, sick, coughing up blood, that he's planning one more campaign before death takes him one last march north, as if geography itself owed him obedience. You hope he makes it, not because you want him to win, because you want him to see what comes next, the ones who rise after you, the ones who won't be so easy to hang. You adjust your position on the stone floor. The ache is constant now. A low burn in your spine, a sharp jab in your hip. Your body is staging its own rebellion, but your mind is sharp. You imagine him, Longshanks, finding out you didn't scream. He'd hate that. He wanted a spectacle. Blood, yes, but also humiliation. He wanted you to be small at the end, reduced. And instead, you've become larger. You've taken up space in minds that matter. In the songs sung by children, in the curses muttered by English soldiers, in the dreams of every Scot who still thinks freedom is a thing you fight for, not request politely. Edward may have won the field, but he'll lose the echo. You run your tongue along your teeth, tasting copper. Your lip cracked again. You press it shut and let the pain flare. A reminder. You're still here, still inconvenient, and still thinking of him. You picture his robes, heavy, embroidered, stained with years and wine and self-satisfaction. You picture him dying alone or surrounded by flatterers. It doesn't matter. What matters is the look on his face when he realizes death comes for kings just the same. That a Scotsman he never touched got into his bones anyway. You lean your head back against the stone, close your eyes, and whisper, I hope you choke on your own crown. Not out of hate, just for symmetry. They're dressed like they're attending a wedding. You're marched into the tribunal chamber, if you can call it that, and what strikes you first is the absurdity of fabric. So many layers. Silks and satins, frilled collars, coats embroidered with enough gold thread to feed a village for a year. It would almost be funny if you weren't the main attraction. Your feet drag slightly, not for drama, just fatigue. Your ankles protest, every step chains rattling a bitter rhythm. The soldier shoves you forward. You keep your balance barely. The audience watches. It smells like incense and hypocrisy. The lords of England are seated on their high-backed chairs, expressions carefully arranged somewhere between boredom and disdain. One yawns behind a gloved hand. Another scratches his beard like he's trying to remember whether you're the one from the banners or the songs. They don't see a man. They see paperwork. You glance around, not with fear, with curiosity. Who came for the show today? Any familiar faces, any nobles pretending they weren't terrified of you just a year ago? It's hard to tell. They all look the same now, powdered and perfumed like overcooked birds stuffed into velvet. One man clears his throat and begins reading something. A charge sheet, you assume. His voice drones. You stop listening after treason. Treason. Always treason. As if rebellion were a clerical error. You shift your stance. Your shoulders ache. But you stand straight anyway. Let them see it. Let them note it. The rebel still holds himself like a wall. They wear gloves, rings, badges of authority. You wear grime and iron. Somehow, you feel more honest. Historians still argue whether this trial was even legitimate. Some call it a formality, others a farce. One chronicler wrote that the sentence had already been decided before you entered the room. He wasn't wrong. They aren't here to decide your fate. They're here to rehearse it. You let your eyes wander again. The wood beams above, the flickering torches on the wall, the way one of the noblemen adjusts his seat cushion with a discreet wiggle. Human, after all. You catch the eye of one younger man. He looks away too quickly, nervous, new to this. Maybe this is his first execution. Maybe he still believes justice is a real thing and not just a louder word used by those with sharper swords. Let him look away. Let him remember your face in dreams. Your own clothes hang off you like a wet sail, torn in 3 places, one shoulder exposed. Your skin has gone pale from the weeks underground. Your beard is uneven. You probably smell awful. You hope you do. Let them choke on the scent of what they've done. One of the noblemen squints at the document in front of him, mutters something to the clerk beside him. They pretend to care about the details. That's the game. Make the page heavy enough with ink and no one notices the blood underneath. The speaker finally stops. A long pause follows. The room adjusts its posture. They wait for you to respond. You say nothing. Let silence do the heavy lifting. You won't give them theatrics. No outburst. No tearful plea. Just stillness. It unnerves them. One man coughs, another shifts in his seat again. The speaker clears his throat and reads a new section. More accusations, more performance. You let your gaze drift upward again. The beams are blackened at the edges. Fire, maybe. Or just time. Everything burns or rots eventually. Even empires. Even kings. You think about what your mother would say if she saw this. Probably something dry like, at least they dressed up for the occasion. You picture her face for a moment. Not young, not old. Just tired. And proud. You wonder if anyone will write about this part. Not the execution. That's obvious. But this. The costumes. The pomp. The farce of justice wrapped in brocade and fur trim. Probably not. It's less exciting than entrails and screams. But this is the real violence, isn't it? The theater? The lie that law exists for the poor the same way it does for the rich. The illusion that anyone in this room believes you're getting what you deserve. You stare at the man who just finished reading. He meets your eyes. You don't blink. He looks down. One more thing they won't put in the history books. They hand you a scroll. Well, not to you directly, of course. You're not trusted to hold paper anymore. It's held up in front of you, unfurled like a banner, and read with the kind of pomp usually reserved for weddings or treaties. A scroll of crimes accusations and good old-fashioned exaggerations. You tilt your head. It's an impressive list. Treason, sedition, murder, heresy. You're surprised they didn't throw in arson, jaywalking, or the theft of someone's grandmother's goat. The crimes seem to blur together, real, imagined convenient. It's theater again. Always theater. They want the public to know you didn't just rebel, you defiled. You corrupted. You defiled while corrupting. You didn't just break laws, you offended the concept of law. You almost applaud. Almost. The clerk's voice rises and falls in rhythm, as if he's trying to lull the room into agreement. A kind of bedtime story for the morally smug. His hands tremble slightly. You wonder if it's fear or just the weight of the scroll. It's big. Apparently, you lived a very busy life. You let the words wash over you. You've heard worse. Usually shouted. Usually by people running away from you with smoking helmets. One charge catches your ear. Something about violating the peace of the realm by wearing arms unlawfully against the sovereign crown. You smile. Because the only thing more unlawful than wearing arms was needing to. You shift your weight and let out a soft breath. The chains clink. The clerk hesitates. Just for a second. Then continues. Historians still argue how much of this list is fabricated. Some claim Edward Scribes wrote charges with poetic flair. Others say your enemies simply copied and pasted the accusations used for other rebels and added a few more for flavor. The result is this scroll, a masterpiece of bureaucratic rage. You scan the crowd. No one looks particularly thrilled. A few look bored. One man is chewing something probably venison. This is a long speech, and apparently death makes some people snacky. You shift again, not to make a point, just because your left shoulder is trying to detach itself from your torso. Joints do that when you're forced to sit chained for days. A new voice takes over. Same script. Different actor. This one is louder, more theatrical. He reads the final lines with the kind of righteous emphasis usually reserved for sermons or plays. You wonder if he ever wanted to be on a stage. He announces the sentence with great flourish. To be hanged until half dead, then revived. To be disemboweled and your entrails burned before your eyes. To be beheaded, then quartered. Then your remains sent to the four corners of the kingdom. It's not just death, it's statement. They don't want to end you. They want to erase you. Reduce your body into geography. Turn you into a map of fear. You look at the man who just finished speaking. He waits as if expecting a response. You give him none. Not because you're brave, because you're done. What's left to say that you regret it, you don't. That you're sorry, you're not. That you're afraid. Maybe a little. But that belongs to you, not to them. Let them keep their scroll. Let them feed their crowds. Let them cling to their illusion of order enforced by spectacle. You were never theirs to define. You glance at the torchlight, at the dust in the beams, at the man chewing meat. You are still more alive than any of them. Even now. Especially now. They call it a trial, but you've been to taverns with more structure. The whole charade barely pretends to be justice. No one asks you questions. No one offers you a defense. There's no advocate waiting in the wings, clutching arguments and parchments, praying for a miracle. There's just you and them, and the inevitable performance lurching toward its bloody finale. You stand because they made you stand, not because you owe them anything. One of the lords leans forward as if to study you. His face is long, his chin weak. He wears a large signet ring that he keeps adjusting on his finger over and over, like a nervous tick disguised as nobility. He clears his throat. Nothing comes out. Then another man, round, red-faced, clearly uncomfortable in his doublet, leans back and says something to the first, probably along the lines of, "Why waste breath on a dead man?" You wonder if you're allowed to speak. You haven't asked, and they haven't offered. You consider it. One word, maybe. one phrase. But it would echo too loudly in this thin pretense of law, and that's not what you want. So you stay quiet. That silence, it starts to press into the walls. A scribe at the edge of the room dips his quill scratches something down. Probably not your words since you haven't spoken, but maybe a description of your expression. Stoic, perhaps, or sullen, or mad with pride. They love adjectives, especially the wrong ones. You think about all the things you could say. You could tell them about the boy who bled out in your arms after the Battle of Falkirk, whispering his mother's name. You could tell them how your men drank rainwater from their helmets because the English burned every well. You could remind them that you tried peace first before the sword. But they already know. They just don't care. Historians still debate whether the trial was private or public, whether it happened in a courtroom, a castle hall, or some ad hoc chamber within the tower itself. The records conflict, maybe deliberately. Maybe they were too embarrassed to document the details of something so blatantly performative. You feel a drop of sweat crawl down your spine. Or maybe it's something else. The body starts to break in odd ways when it knows the end is scheduled. You catch yourself swaying slightly and plant your feet harder into the ground. One small act of defiance. A reminder you're not furniture. Another lord leans forward. "Do you deny these charges?" he asks, voice thin and brittle. Your mouth twitches. That's the best line they could give him. You raise your eyes, look him full in the face, and say nothing. And in that nothing you deliver a clearer answer than any sentence could. He flinches. A tiny movement, barely visible. But you see it. You're not here to beg. You're not here to argue. You're here to stand. They pronounce the sentence again as if repetition makes it more official. The list of horrors they intend to visit upon. The ways they'll slice burn parade. The instruments of punishment they've saved just for you. You listen this time. Not because it matters, but because they want you to tremble. And if you're going to deny them something, you may as well make it everything. You picture their faces tomorrow. Will they watch? Will they look away? Will they brag about it at banquets you don't know? You won't be there to hear the laughter. But maybe, just maybe, someone in the crowd will remember the quiet. The way you never once tried to plead your case. The way your silence stood taller than their chairs, louder than their titles. The trial ends not with a gavel, but with shuffling feet and whispered instructions. The sentence is not sealed with honor, but with efficiency. They've squeezed all the performance they can from your presence. Now they just want you gone. You hear them before you see them. The crowd. It starts as a low murmur somewhere beyond the tower walls. Then the sound grows, a restless tide of voices. Footsteps, the occasional bark of a dog, the creak of wheels, the shriek of a vendor calling out something entirely unrelated to death. Life in all its thoughtless forward motion teems just beyond your view. You're not surprised. You've drawn crowds before. Not for this reason, of course. Once they came to see you ride into towns after a skirmish, mud on your boots and a crooked grin on your face. They cheered then, or stared in awe, or whispered with something like hope. This crowd is different. They've come to see a monster. They've come to see you fall. And part of them, just part, has come to see if it's true. If you're as savage as the leaflets say. If you're 7 feet tall with flames for eyes and the strength of 10 oxen. If you eat babies and spit curses. If you'll scream. If you'll sob. If you'll beg. You don't plan to give them any of those things. You shuffle forward as the guards tug your chains. You no longer resist, not because you've surrendered, but because resistance would mean engagement. You're past that now. They lead you up a narrow stairwell and then through a passage that smells of coal dust and urine. Somewhere a torch gutters and flares, casting shadows that look like old regrets. And then the door opens. The sound hits you in full. In London, alive, curious, unforgiving. You step into the morning and hundreds of eyes snap toward you like shutters. There's a brief hush, just a second. Enough to remind them that you are not just a story. You are a man, breathing, present. Then the voices return. Some shout insults, some laugh, some cheer. A few throw things, vegetable scraps mostly. One strikes your shoulder and slides off with a wet thud. You don't look to see what it was. You focus straight ahead. You lock your jaw not out of pride, but to keep from choking on the stink of the city. Open sewage, fried eels, unwashed armpits, and burning resentment. Historians still argue whether the streets were packed that day or merely lined with the curious. Some records say the turnout rivaled a coronation. Others say it rained and the crowd thinned. You remember neither sun nor storm, just the blur of faces and the weight of being watched. They parade you through Smithfield, the site chosen for the drama. Open space, also good visibility. It doubles as a meat market, which feels appropriate. You catch snatches of conversation. That's him in it. Don't look like much. I heard he ate his own men. No, that was the Frenchman. You wonder how many in this crowd believe they're here for justice, and how many are just here because there's nothing good on at the theater. Your legs ache. Your spine protests. The rope around your waist digs into your side. You're not sure how long the procession is supposed to last, but you feel every step like a nail. And still, you say nothing. You don't scan the faces. You don't look for sympathy. Sympathy is dangerous. It makes you want something. And wanting now is just another form of pain. Instead, you pick a point in the distance, a flag hanging limp from a wooden pole, and you stare at it like it's all that matters. Someone throws a clump of dirt. It misses. Someone spits. It lands. You don't react. That silence again, it builds. The guards exchange glances. They expected resistance, or at least a colorful insult. One keeps looking at you like he's trying to memorize your face. You want to tell him, don't bother. It's already been turned into legend, and legends don't have pores or bruises. You reach the platform. The steps creak under your weight. Not because you're heavy, but because they're old and splintered just like you. The crowd swells forward. You turn slowly to face them, not for them, but for yourself. You scan the sea of strangers. No one you know. No one who fought beside you. Just the city. Just the noise. You blink. And in that moment, you give them everything they feared most, stillness. You meet him just before it begins. Not the executioner, not yet. This one's younger. Slighter. He wears the leather apron, but it hangs on him awkwardly, as if he borrowed it for the occasion. His hands twitch when he sees you. His eyes won't settle. This is the butcher's apprentice. Your escort halts and shoves you toward the wooden platform's edge, where the man waits beside a block, a hook, and a handful of instruments that no one should name before breakfast. He's doing that thing trying not to stare, but failing. You're used to it. Even soldiers, hardened ones, have looked at you with that combination of curiosity and dread. But this one, he's nervous. His jaw works back and forth like he's chewing something invisible. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's excitement. You don't move, don't speak. You let the silence lean forward first. He shifts from foot to foot. He has freckles. You can see a bruise on his neck, high and purple, probably from bumping into one of the beams backstage. If there's a backstage to a human disassembly, this is it. He clears his throat, doesn't speak. Then he reaches mechanically, methodically, for a length of rope. Not the noose. That's later. This one is to bind your legs. He fumbles it. You don't help. His hands are clammy. You feel it through the linen as he tightens the cord around your ankles. Not harsh, not even particularly skilled. Just present. He's here. And that fact seems to surprise him more than it surprises you. Historians still argue whether Wallace spoke to anyone in the final moments, whether he cursed, forgave, or simply observed. Some say he locked eyes with the apprentice and gave him a nod. Others say he spat. Some claim the apprentice vomited afterward and fled the profession entirely. You believe that last one's plausible, because right now he looks green. He tries to meet your gaze, fails, tries again. You hold it, not as a threat, as a mercy. Let him see you, not as a monster, not as a myth, as a man, chained, tired, defiant. He flinches anyway. You wonder how many others he's helped kill. Probably none. This may be his first and last performance. He stands now, arms rigid at his sides, waiting for someone older, louder, more certain to take over. You can feel him begging for instruction without opening his mouth. You take a slow breath. Not for effect, for yourself. There's the executioner. Big man. Thick arms, dark beard. Eyes like someone who's decided long ago to stop caring and sometimes remembers too late that he used to. He's confident, efficient, and probably a little drunk. He barks at the apprentice, who startles and scuttles to the side. Their choreography has clearly been practiced. Your part is to die cleanly. Their part is to make it look productive. The apprentice fumbles again. Something metallic clatters to the boards. A hook, maybe. Someone in the crowd laughs. The executioner scowls. You don't move. You imagine what the apprentice will tell himself later tonight. I was just following orders. It was Wallace he would have done worse to me. I didn't touch the blade. I just handed it over. You know that story. It echoes through every generation. The helper, the assistant, the middleman, always there, never guilty. You let your eyes rest on him one last time. He avoids them again. Then he steps back. The executioner takes his place. There's a chill in the air, but your skin feels flushed. Your blood knows what's coming. So does your mind. So do your bones. But still you say nothing. The crowd leans forward. The apprentice exhales a long, shaky breath. And somewhere in that breath is a tiny prayer that this moment will pass quickly, that he will forget your face. But you never saw his before, and now you never will again. You notice the wood first, rough-hewn, splintered, smelling faintly of rot and fresh sap, as if it was cut last week by a man who didn't ask too many questions. The platform creaks beneath you, not from your weight, but from age, from purpose. This isn't its first death, and it won't be its last. Then comes the iron, gleaming despite the early hour. Cleaned, no doubt, for the occasion. There's something deeply unsettling about the idea of polished execution tools. Someone somewhere took the time to wipe them down, to sharpen edges, to make them shine under the watery London sun. You glance at them only once. That's enough. There's a hook, a saw, a curved blade that probably has a name, though you've no interest in knowing it. A large axe waits nearby, leaned casually against a barrel like it's just resting before the big scene. A sense of unreality creeps in, as if you're watching this from a great height, or through fog, or across the room from someone else's body. But no, this is yours. This is you. And these are the objects that will take you apart. The crowd shifts. You hear murmurs, the low rustle of anticipation. People are ready. Some of them are giddy, Some are scared. One man is hawking pies from a small tray, because apparently nothing pairs better with medieval dismemberment than mutton and pastry. You remain standing. The guards step away. Guards. The apprentice who earlier looked like he might bolt now stands just out of reach, hands still twitching. The executioner, ever the professional, tests the rope. Pulls, grunts, nods to no one in particular. You shift your weight, feeling every injury you've ever earned scream through your legs. But you don't fall. You never will. The axe is lifted, not yet swung, just shown, like a magician displaying his tools before the trick. The crowd grows quieter. Even the children hush, sensing something real about to unfold. And still you say nothing. You take in the scene around you deliberately, slowly. The color of the sky, dull gray with a hint of gold on the edge. The smell of iron and oil. The sticky sweat crawling down your back. The boards beneath your feet uneven, slightly warped near the center. A small stain, maybe old blood, maybe something else. You step near it. You want to remember. Historians still argue whether Wallace resisted, whether he had to be dragged, whether he fought until the end. You'll let them argue. You know the truth. You've chosen every single step. You catalog everything. A woman in the front row clutching a kerchief. She's not crying, just staring. A boy beside her chews something, his mouth open. A raven perches on a post, watching. A man in black scribbles on a parchment, recording the event or pretending to. He won't get the details right. No one ever does. You flex your fingers. One last time. They still move. Still yours. Then the ropes come. Rough course soaked in something, maybe water, maybe sweat, maybe worse. They bind your wrists tighter, though you weren't trying to pull free. The executioner steps forward now. He holds something. A blade, you think. It catches the light and sends a thin beam flashing across your vision. You blink. You are not afraid. You are aware. And that is worse for them, because awareness lingers. Awareness becomes memory, and memory becomes legend. You take one breath long and steady. The crowd waits for a scream, a plea, a prayer. They get none. What they get is the silence of a man who has seen the iron, felt the wood measured the weight of it all, and decided to remain unmoved. You are no longer here. Not entirely, at least. Your body remains bound, bruised, breathing. But your mind, ever unruly, has wandered, slipped free, drifted backward up and over the walls of this square, away from the crowd, the gallows, the stink of meat pies and fear. You are somewhere else now. A stream, highland-fed, cold, clear, alive with motion. You remember the way it curled between mossy rocks, how the sunlight caught in the ripples like blades drawn beneath the surface. You kneel beside it. Cupped hands, water lifted to your face, a moment of stillness. And then laughter. Yours, maybe. Or one of the men beside you. You can't recall who. The name's gone. The memory isn't. You were younger then. Skin tighter, joints more obedient, heart louder. There was no crown on your thoughts, no England at your back. Just the moment. The sky. The water. The feel of being clean. Now, the only thing clean is the knife. You return reluctantly as the executioner tightens the bindings. Your knees are bending now, not because you're buckling, but because they want you down. This next part, they say, must be done kneeling. A symbol, a posture. One more theatrical gesture in a morning made entirely of them. You don't resist, but in your mind, you're still beside the stream. Your hands wet, your face dripping, the sun on your back. That stupid horse that tried to drink from your cupped palms. The one with the white patch over its left eye, what did you name it? Something ridiculous. You never kept horses long. They had a habit of getting killed when you needed them most. You smile. Just a twitch at the corner of your mouth. No one sees it. The executioner is checking the straps again. His hands are fast practiced. He mutters something. A prayer, edit, curse you don't ask. Your shoulders scream. Your wrists ache. The pressure on your chest makes each breath a bit shallower. The crowd doesn't quiet. Not really. A few laughs, a few coughs. A woman shouts something in a Scottish accent too far away to make out. But you catch the tone. Defiant. You hope she survives the day. Historians still argue whether anyone in the crowd spoke on your behalf. One chronicle claims a fight broke out, a dozen Scots arrested for trying to storm the platform. Another dismisses it as fantasy. The truth as always lies somewhere between ink and invention. The blade gleams in the corner of your eye. You let it stay there. You won't face it. You've seen enough of that. Instead, you think of the water. The way it felt against your skin. Cold, yes, but clean. Honest. No chains, no laws, no kings, just water. You hear a creak, now wood, bending as the executioner takes his place behind you. The platform sways slightly. Someone mutters an amen. You suspect it's more for the executioner than for you. You lean forward slightly. Not submission, just gravity. The stream runs cold in your mind, and you realize something. That moment by the water wasn't grand, wasn't heroic, wasn't even particularly memorable at the time. But it was yours. And right now, with the crowd, murmuring the blade, whispering the pain, flaring, it is the one thing they cannot touch. They can take the body. They can unmake the name. But they'll never reach that boy by the stream. Never touch that moment of peace. Never unwrite that memory. You open your eyes, not to beg, just to see the light one last time. It is pale, gentle, and almost kind. They tug at you now, not gently. Your arms are stretched, and you can feel the strain pulling across your chest, your spine resisting like a bowstring held too long. The ropes bite into your skin, but you barely notice anymore. What you do notice is how clumsy they are about it. You wonder how many times they've done this. The cart creaks under your knees. It's the final transport, more symbolic than practical. You're not going far. Just a short ride through the square to show the people what rebellion looks like when it's finished. They hoist you up with winches and muscle. A grunt here, a slip there. One of them curses. You don't. Not because you're above it, but because your breath is precious now. You save it. Like a coin you'll never spend. Your wrists are bound high, your ankles wide. They've spread you out like laundry, as if exposure is punishment. But you don't feel shame. You feel tired. Your eyes scan the crowd, not because you expect anyone familiar, but because it's strange to be this visible and this alone. The faces blur. Some are amused, some disgusted. Some curiously look unsure. A few children, a priest, a man eating something off a stick. You focus on the man. He watches you too long. You stare back until he looks away. The wind picks up slightly. It carries the stink of the city dung's sweat, wood, smoke, fear, but also baking bread. You wonder if that's nearby or just a trick of memory dragging you back to the hills and kitchens and fires you'll never see again. And then your body shifts. They're dragging the cart now. You jolt forward an inch. Ropes tighten. The wood creaks beneath you, complaining like an old dog being pulled from a nap. This is the moment you think when most men scream. They don't scream from pain, not yet. They scream from knowing that this is no longer a possibility. It's a schedule, that they've become a task to complete before lunch. But you don't scream. Instead, you breathe. Slow, measured, like you're preparing for a duel. And in a way, you are. Pain is coming. It always does. You remember your first real wound, a slice along the ribs, courtesy of an English knight whose name you never bothered to learn. You were 20. The pain was shocking, disobedient. It didn't feel like part of your body. It felt like betrayal. You swore loudly and passed out. You've learned a lot since then. Mostly that pain can be bargained with. Bribed with memory. Distracted with rhythm. Drowned in will. You feel the platform shudder as another chain is locked. You close your eyes just for a moment. Historians still debate whether Wallace was semi-conscious at this point or fully alert. Some suggest they drugged prisoners for this phase. Others argue the English wanted you aware that it made the message clearer, that it made the silence more haunting. You open your eyes again. There's a man kneeling near your legs, adjusting something. His hands are thick stained with grease or blood or both. He doesn't look up, just keeps muttering instructions to himself. You wonder what he tells his wife he does for a living. The crowd begins to hush. It's happening. The guards step back. A bell rings. The first blow is not a blow. It's the removal of breath. The moment just before when everything holds still. And the body, even yours, braces for the storm. The pain comes next. It is not sharp. It is total. Like fire and ice and pressure and betrayal, all sharing the same room inside your body. But you stay quiet. You grip the memory of that stream. You grip the rhythm of your breath. You grip the image of hills that no longer belong to you. Let them take flesh. They cannot take you. You are now a storm contained in silence. And storms, real storms, never scream. London watches, and you feel every gaze like pins in your skin. You can't count the faces now. You stop trying after the first dozen when you realize they all wear the same mask curiosity bordering on hunger. Their eyes dart from your face to your limbs, to the executioner's hands. Like children watching a magician, not for the trick, but for the moment the rabbit stops twitching. You are the rabbit, or so they think. They do not see what matters. They don't see your focus narrowing like a tunnel. They don't see you clinging not to life, but to stillness. Not to hope, but to integrity. You are not surviving. You are choosing. The cart beneath you rocks slightly. Someone adjusts a chain. A man with sweat-darkened sleeves steps closer and wraps leather around your arm. Not to comfort you, just to hold it steady. Just to make sure the crowd gets their show without interruption. A voice nearby mutters, "Get on with it." Another voice further back calls, "Make him scream." You don't look at them. Your gaze is skyward. The clouds are moving fast. Light gray wisps racing like they're fleeing the square. They know what's about to happen. They want no part of it. Historians still argue whether the public execution of Wallace was a moment of national catharsis or grotesque propaganda. Whether the crowd rejoiced or recoiled. Whether they chanted for blood or stood stunned into silence. The records contradict each other because memory contradicts itself. Even collective memory. But you remember. The baker's boy with the crooked teeth shouting insults he barely understood. The priest muttering prayers half-heartedly, as if trying to make up for being there. The woman with a hard jaw and clenched fists, standing silently possibly, Scottish, possibly just human enough to recognize horror when she sees it. And the noise. Oh, the noise. Not a roar, not a cheer, a churn. A stomach-turning blend of voices, movement, anticipation, and something far more dangerous spectacle. The crowd doesn't want truth. It wants content. You become a moment. You become a story that fathers will tell their sons when they want to teach obedience. I saw William Wallace. He didn't even scream when they won't finish the sentence. They never do. You fix your eyes on a single spire in the distance, just a silhouette. It doesn't matter which church. It's a line, a point, a north star to balance the sea of faces below. Your hands clench slightly. You're not supposed to have that control. They must not have noticed. Good. The executioner shifts behind you. The tools make their sounds iron on wood leather, dragging over grained breath, whistling through gritted teeth. Your ears ring. It's not pain. It's clarity. You realize something you're winning. Not in the way anyone can measure, not in land or legacy or flag, but in resistance. You are a stone they cannot move, even as they unmake you, even as your body becomes a lesson, even as they show children what happens when a man says no to a crown. You are still here. The executioner shouts something you don't hear. It's for the crowd, not for you. Your silence is louder than his command, and it spreads. The front row stop talking, then the second, then the third. The boy stops chewing. The priest stops muttering. Even the wind stills. London watches, but for the first time, it listens. They want to scream. It's written across their faces, their mouths slightly open, their eyes wide, not in sympathy, but in anticipation. They've been standing in the damp morning for over an hour, waiting for the breaking point, the crack, the sound that proves you're human, and more importantly, defeated. You don't give it to them. Instead, you bite down. Not on your tongue, not on wood. There is nothing in your mouth. Just teeth against teeth, jaw clenched so tight, your temples throb. Pain builds like heat in a sealed room. You feel it in your stomach, your ribs, your spine. Like fire under your skin, like iron soaking into your muscles. But you stay silent. The executioner steps forward again. He doesn't speak. His face is blank now, whether out of boredom or resignation, you can't tell. His tools are slick. His gloves, if he wears them, are stained. He works like a carpenter, not an executioner. Just another day. Just another scaffold. You don't look at him. You're past faces now. You look inward. The scream they want claws at the edge of your throat. Not from fear. From the body trying to save itself. It thinks noise will stop this, that it can call for help. But there's no one to call, and no help to come. So you hold it in, let the scream curl down inside you and die. That's your victory. Somewhere in the crowd, someone coughs, then laughs, then coughs again, as if trying to cover the slip. Maybe they expected a monster and are annoyed to find a man. One woman sobs quietly, or maybe she's just breathing deeply. Grief and boredom wear the same mask in crowds. The ropes tighten. A leather strap is buckled near your midsection. Your legs are trembling not from fear, but from lack of blood. You've been half suspended for too long. Another movement, another cut. This one burns. Your vision blurs for a moment. You blink through it. Your body is shaking now, not dramatically, not theatrically. Just subtle tremors like leaves in wind. But still no sound. You draw air in through your nose. Let it fill what's left of your lungs. Let it anchor you. You remember a winter night by a fire. You were with a few men no more than 4, hiding in a ruined barn. One of them had lice. One had a voice that cracked when he sang. One had already lost 2 fingers to frostbite and kept pretending he hadn't noticed. You laughed that night. You shared a stolen hen and the worst bread you'd ever tasted. And you laughed. You hold that night now like a stone in your palm. Cold, solid, real. That was life. This is pageantry. The executioner is speaking again, but not to you, to the crowd. Something about justice, something about order. You hear the words, but they land like pebbles against a wall. Justice, order, as if either of those things has ever known your name. Historians still argue whether you uttered anything during the execution. Some insist you whispered a final prayer, others claim you cursed the king. But most agree on one thing: you didn't scream. And they wanted it so badly. You were supposed to collapse, to wail, to break. That's the climax they came for. But instead, you are still standing or hanging without giving them what they paid for. They begin to fidget now, restless, confused. Because a man screaming is a story, but a man silent, that's a problem. A silent man gets remembered. He gets turned into ballads, into statues, into the kind of nightmare kings whisper about when their teeth hurt in the night. You feel faint now. Your arms are numb. Your skin is slick with something blood-sweat memory. But still no scream. The executioner curses. You win. Pain becomes rhythm, not sharp anymore, not wild or flaring or new. It pulses now, steady, relentless, like a drumbeat inside your bones. 1, 2, 1, 2. A hollow thud you can almost time your breath to. You're not sure when it stopped being pain and started being music, but here it is. You lean into it. Not physically, you can't, but mentally. You ride it the way you once rode a horse, at full gallop, teeth, grit, reins, tight winds screaming in your ears. You don't control it. You just move with it. It's strange what the body can tolerate when the mind stops resisting. The next cut comes. You feel it, you register it, but you don't react. Somewhere, a man gasps. A woman turns her face. The crowd isn't roaring anymore. They've gone quiet in that tight, uncomfortable way humans do when confronted with something they didn't actually want to understand. They came for a scream. What they're getting is discipline. You are no longer William Wallace, the outlaw, the traitor, the symbol. You are something else now. A question they cannot answer. A stillness they cannot shake. The world narrows. You hear your heartbeat still steady. You hear the creak of the platform, the wind brushing against something high above. And somewhere, impossibly, a bird sings, just one sharp note. Then silence. It doesn't make sense. No bird should be this close to a crowd, this dense to a stage, this cruel. But there it is. One clean chirp defiant, you almost laugh, but you don't. You save the breath. Your jaw clenches tighter. A muscle in your neck twitches. Pain again this time, higher somewhere along your ribs. You feel the wet warmth that follows. It spreads slowly like ink through parchment. You're not sure what part of you they've reached now. You don't want to know. The rhythm continues. Pain breath. Pain breath. You count it instead of seconds, instead of moments. You let it become your metronome. Historians still argue whether Wallace maintained consciousness throughout the ordeal. Some claim he slipped into shock, others that he fought to stay awake, determined not to die on their terms. They missed the point. It wasn't about staying conscious. It was about staying yourself. And you've done that. Every moment, every breath, your choice. They can tear down the walls of your body. They can split, burn, and parade what remains. But they can't touch the fact that you're still inside, still intact, still commanding your own silence like it's a sword. You think of your brother. You think of the hills where you first learned to swing a stick like it mattered. You think of the cold water of the stream and the sun-warmed stone you used as a seat while drying your boots. You think of 1,000 things that don't belong here, and that's why you think of them. Because this is your space. Even now. Especially now. You can't feel your feet. Your hands have gone numb. Your chest rises and falls slower now. Each inhale a decision, but the rhythm continues. The executioner grunts. The crowd murmurs. Someone says your name unsure if they're allowed to. Wallace. Just that. Not a curse, not a cheer, just a recognition. You close your eyes. Just for a second. 1, 2, 1, 2. Still breathing, still you, and still no scream. A banner rises. You can't see it, but you can hear the crowd shift as it goes up, some symbolic piece of cloth held high by trembling hands, bearing the royal seal or the city's crest or whatever sigil they believe represents order. It flaps once in the breeze like it's proud of itself. There's a cheer, not loud, not universal, not quite convinced. It's the kind of cheer people give when they're expected to. When they're told a thing has happened and they know how to respond, even if their hearts aren't sure. You don't cheer, obviously. You're still tied, still bleeding, still hanging there in pieces, and yet still not broken. The banner means they think it's over, that victory is declared, that the rebel is vanquished and the world is tidy again. You almost want to laugh. They raise a banner like it ends something, as if cloth and color and ceremony can wipe away what you've done, what you've inspired, what you've become. Your breath comes ragged now, no longer steady. Your ribs no longer move as they once did. The pain, though quieter, has shifted into something deeper, something cellular. Your body has moved past protest. Now it simply holds on. The banner flaps again. Someone nearby shouts, "God save the king," and others repeat it, not in unison, but in patches like applause for a play no one understood. You tilt your head slightly, just enough to hear better. Not out of interest, out of endurance. Let them shout. Let them wave flags. Let them build their illusion of triumph. Because you're still here, still breathing barely, still aware, still you. Historians still argue whether the banner raised at Wallace's execution was English or a more local emblem, perhaps the city's. Some records say it was tattered. Others say it gleamed. Some say it never existed at all. But something always gets raised when power thinks it's won. It's not the banner that matters. It's who looks away first. And right now, you're not blinking. You picture Scotland, not the idea, but the place. The dirt under your nails. The frost on the edge of the thatch. The way smoke curls from a chimney in the morning, promising warmth. These things are not on banners. They are not in books, but they are yours. You wonder how long the crowd will linger. How many will write about today? How many will lie? There will be poems, songs, maybe even statues. But not from these people. From others. From those who heard something in your silence. The banner flaps again, as if growing restless. Even it seems unsure now. You close your eyes and listen to the murmurs, to the wind, to your own pulse. You're fading. You know that. But it doesn't feel like loss. It feels like release. The banner will fall soon. They always do. But you'll stay. Not in the square, not in the chains, but in the memory that someone stood still while the empire screamed for obedience and refused to kneel. The sound of nothing. That's what fills the space now. Not silence, not really. There's still the shuffling of feet, the rustle of cloaks, the distant clatter of a cart rolling over cobblestones. A baby cries somewhere. A horse snorts. London never truly quiets. But around you, there's nothing. No voices directed your way. No laughter. No final jeers. Because the crowd doesn't know what to do when the main character doesn't deliver the final line. You were supposed to scream. You didn't. You were supposed to curse or plead or declare something history could mangle into a quote. You didn't. So now they're left with the sound of their own confusion. And that is louder than anything you could have said. You let your head tilt forward slightly, not from weakness, but from decision. Let them see your body sag. Let them think maybe now it's over. It's not. Your thoughts remain. They flicker like fireflies, darting between memories and fragments and things that could have been. You think of the boy from the village with the crooked grin who died at Stirling with your name on his lips. You think of the flagstones outside the abbey where you once saw a wedding back when weddings still felt possible. You think of the way your mother's hands smelled after peeling turnips in the winter. None of these things belong in this moment, and yet they do, because they are part of you. They are the you that cannot be carved, quartered, or burned. Pain has dulled to a distant drum now. You float between breaths, each one more delicate than the last. A soft inhale, a thinner exhale, like someone folding a letter one crease at a time. Historians still argue whether Wallace was conscious in his final moments, whether he heard the crowd's dismay, whether he felt the absence of noise as a kind of answer. You don't need to argue, you know, because you're in it. This moment, this hush, this hanging question no one knows how to answer. There's a weight to it, not of chains, but of expectation denied. A collective breath held too long and now unsure what to do with itself. You've become the hole in their story. And holes are dangerous. They invite the imagination. They invite myth. You open your eyes barely. A single beam of light cuts across your vision. Soft, pale. Morning still lingers on the edges of this terrible theater. A man coughs. Another one turns to leave. Someone drops an apple core near the front of the platform. The world continues, but not quite the same, because now there is a gap in the narrative. A man who died with no scream, no apology, no submission, only a silence that stared back and held. The sound of nothing fills the square, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels full of something they don't yet understand, and that you realize is the most powerful noise of all. The end of the body. You can feel it, not like falling, not like being struck, but like dissolving. Like mist curling at the edge of the forest in early morning, fading, thinning, softening into the world. Your hands are gone. Not physically, you can see them still bound, still present. But the sensation of them vanished. They no longer report back to the mind that owned them. You blink once slow. The light hurts now, not sharply, just as a reminder that you still have eyes, that you still in some quiet way exist. But that's fading too. The air moves in and out of your lungs in irregular rhythms. One breath shallow, the next shallower still. And yet, somewhere deep inside, the part of you that is not muscle or blood or name remains fully alert. You notice things. The shift in temperature as the wind turns, the faint tang of iron in your throat, the way the sweat on your skin begins to cool faster than it should. You're being left, piece by piece, not by them, by your body. And strangely, you're okay with it. You were never just this. The pain has faded into a memory now, distant and dim. It happened to you, but it no longer owns you. They can't hurt you anymore. The executioner mutters something. You don't catch it. His voice sounds underwater, muffled, like a man speaking through cloth or from a very long way away. You no longer care what he says. He's no longer real. only your thoughts are. And those, they're sharp. You think about the sound of boots in snow. You think about rain on a canvas tent. You think about that moment years ago when you picked up a broken sword, grinned at your own reflection in the jagged steel, and kept fighting anyway. You think about your first breath, and now your last. Historians still debate whether William Wallace's final thoughts were a victory or defeat of God or country. But you know better, because your final thoughts are you, your whole self, unapologized for, uncut by regret, unafraid. The body falters now. Your chest moves once unsure, again, smaller. The world tilts, and yet clarity holds. You are still aware of what was, of what is, and of what might be. The body ends, but the meaning refuses. It stays, like steam from hot breath on a winter morning, like words whispered in firelight, like a name that refuses to be buried. You are not gone. Not yet. And not entirely. Scotland isn't watching. Not really, not here, not now. No Highlander stands in this crowd, arms crossed, jaw tight, with shared defiance. No farmer from Ayrshire has crept south to risk his neck for a glimpse of your end. There are no bagpipes, no flags, no whispered Gaelic prayers drifting up toward the scaffold. You are alone. The only people watching are Londoners, strangers, outsiders, people who will remember your death but not your life, people who will talk of the spectacle but never understand what started it. You feel it, that absence, not as a wound but as a truth. You never expected them to come, not really. That's not how rebellion works. You don't gather a fan club when the sentence is death. You gather memory, legacy, and those things are slow to bloom. But still, it would have been something. A familiar face, a voice shouting your name from the back, even just one tartan scrap tucked under a cloak. Instead, there's a child on someone's shoulders eating a pear. There's a merchant whispering the price of fish as he watches your ribs rise and fall. There's a man taking bets on how much longer you'll last. This is your audience. And yet, you don't resent them. They've been told a story, and they came to see if it ends the way it was written. You just happen to rewrite it. With silence, with stillness, with refusal. Historians still argue whether Wallace expected rescue, whether secret supporters planned to strike during the execution, whether it was all part of a grander plan that failed at the final moment. There was no plan, just the cart, the rope, and your decision to go quietly. But you still imagine the hills. You see them green and wet, stretching toward the sky, the way the fog clings to the peaks like a secret. You hear the crows in the distance, the rustle of heather underfoot. You smell the peat rich and old and alive. You close your eyes and you're there. Not in chains, not in pain. Just there. In the country that made you. And perhaps the country that forgot you for now. But forgetting is a temporary thing. You know how memory works. It takes time. It needs silence to grow in. And you've given it that. A silence they won't forget. A silence that will travel north. A silence that will find its way into fireside stories and songs that no scribe will ever touch. You are not being watched by your countrymen, but one day they'll hear you. And that will be louder than any scream. An echo in the dark. It comes after everything else, after the pain, after the platform, after the cheers and murmurs and hesitant footsteps that shuffle away once it's done. It arrives when the crowd has thinned, when the ropes are slack, when the body is no longer required to perform. It isn't sound, not really. It's what's left of sound. The shape of your presence in a space no longer ready to hold it. They take what remains of you, what they think remains. The physical pieces, bones and blood, and the name etched onto scraps of paper to be nailed across the country. Your head to one gate, your limbs to others. Symbols, warnings, geography turned into execution. They think they're ending you by dividing you. They're wrong. They've only made you bigger. Because in every town where a part of you is displayed, a new whisper begins. And whispers are portable. One man says, "I heard he never screamed." Another says, "My uncle marched with him once." A woman hums a tune she swears was sung by Wallace's men before battle. A child names his dog after you. The echo begins to move, no longer tied to flesh, no longer bound to voice. It's passed through mouths and firelight and ink scratched hastily in the back of a tavern ledger. You become many things. A ghost, a martyr, a reason, a problem. Historians still argue whether the English achieved what they wanted with Wallace's execution, whether it quelled the rebellion or stoked it, whether the silence that followed was relief or pressure. But they never question that your name survived. They can't. It's too late. Your body was quartered. But your story, it multiplied. Because every man who heard of your stillness had to choose ignore it or ask why. And in that question, you remain. You are not Wallace the man now. You are Wallace the echo. You ring in the minds of blacksmiths who sharpened swords in secret, in shepherds who taught their sons to fight with sticks, in the quiet resistance of grandmothers who boiled stew for rebels in silence. And that echo, soft, invisible, undying, settles in the corners of castles and kitchens alike. It waits, it reminds, it haunts, not with violence, with a memory of defiance, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that outlives. You're gone now. But your silence, it's still speaking. And the dark remembers. You did not scream. That is the last truth. Not the sentence, not the scaffold, not the way your limbs were carried off like unwanted confessions. Not the men who planned it, or the crowd who watched. None of them are what lasts. Only this: you did not scream. And that fact, so simple, so stubborn, so inconvenient, will survive all their efforts to reduce you. It was your final choice. When all other freedoms had been stripped, your sword, your voice, your movement, your future, you found the one thing they couldn't take: your refusal. You refused them your terror. You refused them your permission. You refused them the pleasure of making you small. It wasn't because you were fearless. You were not. It wasn't because you were holy. You were not that either. It was because you knew. Knew that in a world run by men with crowns and scrolls and sharpened steel silence could be louder than banners. That quiet could be heavier than execution. And so you gave them nothing. The executioner, frustrated, wiped his brow. The crowd shifted, uneasy, unsatisfied. Your enemies would call it stubbornness. But those who understand, they will call it clarity. Historians still argue whether it was pride, courage, or exhaustion. They ask how a man could withstand such horror and never cry out. Some try to humanize you by imagining a secret sob hidden behind clenched teeth. Others elevate you into a myth, a cold stone figure immune to mortal fear. But the truth is simpler. You chose. You held. You ended as you lived with resistance in your blood and a storm in your spine. They took your body, your name, your breath, but not that final choice, that you kept. And in that final refusal, you gave the world the thing it needed most. Not a martyr, not a saint, not even a hero. You gave them a memory of what it means not to yield. And now, it is quiet again. No crowd, no iron, No platform. Only the wind moving gently across the square, brushing the worn wood and the fraying ropes, cleaning what remains. No banner flies, no trumpet sounds, just the echo. Still there, still waiting, still yours. The light has changed. Not brighter, not darker, just softer. As if the world itself has exhaled. As if the earth beneath London has finally loosened its grip on what it held, and the sky, pale and stretched, can breathe again. There are no crowds now, no torches, no iron. Only a wooden platform slowly cooling in the morning air. The sound of hooves fading down a side street. The whisper of pigeons returning to the rooftops. The city moves on as it always does. But somewhere far away on a hill or in a field or beside a quiet stream, someone remembers. They whisper a name. Not loudly, not proudly. Just enough to keep it alive. Enough to turn silence into something that lasts. And in that whisper is the real ending. Not the ropes, not the fire, not the blade, but the breath that came after. The one that didn't scream. The one that chose stillness. The one that still echoes all these years later in every place where someone stands tall when told to kneel. So wherever you are, listener, whatever battles you're fighting, however heavy the crown or cold the iron, remember this: there is strength in not answering back. There is power in being still. And there is something almost holy in meeting the end with your spine straight and your voice quiet. Now, let your shoulders relax. Let your breath slow. You've made it to the end. You did not scream, and you were never alone. Sweet dreams.